guys, it's Sam, and this is my February wrap-up. The first book I read in February was So Let Them Burn by Camilla Cole. This is a book I listened to on audio, and I highly recommend it. And the synopsis on the cover is so deceiving. Not completely, but a little bit. The book sounds like, from the description, that it's about one character and you only follow one POV. You actually follow two. It's about two sisters who previously were very involved in this war to cast out the colonizers from their island home. And so one of the sisters could communicate and take on the powers of the gods, and so it was kind of like a chosen one back when she was 12. And then the other sister was also a part of the military and was helping and just wasn't as powerful, and they drove out people who had dragons, colonizing force of white people who had dragons. And this is now 5 years later, and so they're now older teenagers. So this is almost like a story that comes after a middle grade adventure story, right? With the chosen one narrative and all of that. So we're following the two sisters and all of the aftermath that has happened since. So especially that chosen one character, who she is now. And what happens at the beginning of the story is that the other sister, who was not a chosen one, gets chosen by a dragon at a peace delegation. So the colonizing force comes and she gets chosen by a dragon to be a dragon rider. And so she has to go back and be with this dragon and be trained as a dragon rider. So she has to go back to a people who do not want her, who look down on her, all of that. But she's bonded and a very important dragon rider, because there's not many of these. And so she has to go away to this school and do that. And then her sister just wants to save her and get her back, because she's you're not safe there. And everything goes from there. This is also sapphic, and it also is about who's a hero, who's a villain, what makes a villain, potential villain origin story, who are these gods, all of this stuff. It's very fast-paced and fun, and this, again, who is pulling all of the strings here, who's the bad guy. Obviously, colonization as a theme is, very much seen as bad, but then the people who are existing in that space are okay, who's the true villain here? This idea of villainy taking on many forms, and villainy also being about what people are pushed into, all this stuff. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I will be re-listening to it once the second book comes out. I think it's just supposed to be a duology. It might be a trilogy. There's nowhere here that shows how many books there are going to be, at least what I was able to find. I was looking around being how much do we have? It feels like a duology series, but I quite enjoyed this. And if you're looking for better dragon books than some of the popular ones that are out there, this is a good one. I have another dragon book to talk about later. And we have The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, and this is our book club pick, or it was, for January. There was a lot of scheduling things going on, and this book being very dense, we had to push some things around. So we'll be talking about this book and our book for February in a live show. This is an adult fantasy story that is super hard to explain because there's a lot kind of going on, but you have a character who is watching a sort of magical performance in a theater outside of time that is both happening now and in the past in an oral tradition way, but it's a performance. And then you're getting the narrative of the performance. And the performance is following two characters who are very entrenched in deals with the gods and going on a quest and that kind of thing. So you're watching an epic quest, but you're also getting tidbits of the character who is watching their play performance. That part is told in second person narrative. Most of it is told in third person, and then you get some in first person. This, on a craft level, is exquisite and so well done. And the fact that this got overlooked for so many awards last year is very concerning to me now that I have read it, because I had a lot of people talking about it and being this book is so good. The craft, the writing, and the ways that the author uses so many different sort of writing styles, tenses, things like that, that you almost feel like you're reading multiple books in one book, even though you're following the same story. The types of storytelling are different, and this is heavily inspired by oral tradition. And so you get that, and so you almost get a sense of having different narrators. And the way that you're sort of feeling, or at least the way that I felt about the story, sort of changed depending on what narrator I was following. This is very dense literary fantasy. So it won't be for everybody, but if you like things that are not necessarily spoon-feeding everything to you, then you will enjoy this. And if you can sit in for something more dense, yes, as well. I end up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Again, craft-wise, an amazing undertaking, but there were parts, because you have this sort of story element where you feel a little bit, or at least I felt, at a distance from some of the characters. It was hard for me to really like get in and feel for the characters, but there was parts of it that I got like very connected to and parts of the story that really resonated. But that whole different voice thing is very intentional. It just didn't completely work for me in every single way, but I think this is really worthy of a lot more accolades than it has gotten. And yeah, it's very dense, a lot to talk about, interesting, and just a story and how stories evolve and the complexity of like myth, all of that is present here. Then I read Bride by Ellie Hazelwood. This is so funny because when I requested this book, I didn't know that it was anything more than just like a paranormal romance, and it truly isn't in most ways. So I will tell you, this is a adult paranormal romance that is following a vampire and a werewolf, and it is a sort of like contemporary fantasy. So humans do exist, and there are vampires and werewolves, and everyone knows about them. And vampires and werewolves and humans have kind of been in a war forever, as they do in most paranormal stories. At the beginning of the story, our main character, Misery, who's a vampire, is getting married off to like the head of the werewolves, right? An arranged marriage trope. She doesn't really feel at home with the vampires either, because in some of the political machinations that have happened, she, as a kid, was given to humans in order to, like, keep the peace and things. So she's all very tied up in political machinations, and also her best friend has been missing, and she doesn't know where she is. And she thinks there's some connection to this werewolf alpha, and so she wants to go and do that and just figure that out, which is why she agrees to it in the first place. And everything goes from there. So this is just fine. The reason that people, I think, got so up in arms about this book a little bit, or it's getting a ton of attention, is because there are Omegaverse elements to it that are so tiny and minute that it's like barely. But if you don't know what Omegaverse is, I'm not going to be the one to tell you. You need to use Google. I am not going to rate this video for mature audiences, but it is a fanfiction trope, and honestly, a lot of things about Omegaverse is very like based sort of in like wolf dynamics, wolf pack dynamics. So because of that, a lot of it is just very similar to your normal paranormal romance. There are just a few added elements, and they're very few, because a couple of the other ones that are like typical Omegaverse, you also just see in paranormal romance. But there's one thing in particular, so there's kind of a trigger warning for that, in like a graphic sex way, that people might not enjoy. I was just like, it's just another addition to a paranormal romance thing. So this was fine. This was like a 3-star, 3.5 star for me. Like, I will eat up a paranormal romance. This is a little bit more steamy. There was definitely more sex scenes, but paranormal romance also tends to be steamier. So I didn't find this to be anything like super groundbreaking. I guess it's bringing Omegaverse in some ways, even though there's been other Omegaverse books written. It's kind of bringing it to the forefront because Ellie Hazelwood is such like a big name in romance now. But this was just fine. If you like paranormal romance, you'll probably like this. If you don't get squicked out by some of the Omegaverse stuff, you probably won't mind this. And literally the Omegaverse stuff is like so minor in comparison to what I thought I was getting into when I heard this was Omegaverse, but I'd already requested it. Then I listened to Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. This is a novella that's taking place in a alternate history in the United States post the Civil War, and it's following a group of women, but we have one main character, but it's following a group of women who hunt Ku Kluxes, so who hunt KKK members, but those KKK members are turning into like literal monsters, like body horror monsters. And they're also like, the main character also discovers that like there's something more tied to her as well. And so you have this like overarching thing of not just being about the monsters, but like what makes a monster, and like hate, as like an antagonist and as a villain and stuff. So there's trigger warnings for racism, gore, body horror. Again, this is a novella, so it's fairly short. This was just fine. I felt like it could be fleshed out a little bit more. Like I wanted this to be more of a novel. So this was like a solid like 3.5 stars. I really like P. Djeli Clark's work in general, but I do prefer his novels. And this was like, okay, cool alternate history. And there was these like horror elements. I don't find body horror to be very horrific to me. Like I'm very cool with body horror in general. It just doesn't bother me. So if you're looking for more of a horror, and you are into like body horror and that freaks you out, this will probably freak you out a lot because there's just like a lot, like it can be very gross. Overall, the idea of, you know, violence making monsters and hate turning people into actual monsters is like a theme within like horror and fantasy and sci-fi that I enjoy. Then we have The Unbroken by C.L. Clark. This is the first book in an adult fantasy, I think it's going to be a trilogy. The third book is not out yet, but the second book was released last year. And this is following two characters. One is Terrain, who is a soldier that was taken from her home country by a colonizing force and turned into basically a foot soldier, like a conscript, whatever. But like essentially a slave, but she doesn't feel like she's a slave, but she was forced from a young age to be a soldier for them. And she is going back to the area that she was taken from. Like her and her like military unit are going, but she wants to be like the best soldier. She only wants to look out for her other soldiers who are in that same kind of unit, so they're called the Sands, which differentiates them from like the other parts of the military. And she just wants to look out for them, do what's best for them, get promoted to make things better for them because like everyone looks down on them. And our other main character is Luca, and she is the princess who is going to be next in line for the throne. Her uncle is currently the regent and is holding power, but she wants to like take her throne back essentially. And so she's there in that same place to try to like sort of do some political machination-y things to prove that she can like take her throne back. But she is from that conquering nation. And these two women eventually cross paths. They need each other for various things, and everything goes from there. So this is, again, heavier themes here with the colonization, racism, there's some gore, and there's some mentions of rape, but nothing on page. I really enjoyed this, and you will enjoy this if you like unlikable characters slash books that really focus on the character's flaws, because you have some things here where you're like, why are you doing that? Like the characters make some like dumb choices, but you know why they make them within the context of what's happening. The world is really interesting. There's some different magics and things, and just like taking this colonized area and like a rebellion that's forming and seeing like all of the different elements to a rebellion and having people come in who are new to this, and just how people will like evolve and change and grow when faced with some like new ideas that they hadn't necessarily been exposed to before, and like good people making bad choices and all of that. So the ending was like a little weak though. I ended up bumping this down to 4 stars instead of 5. This could have been a 5-star for me. The ending wrapped up like so fast in a way that was kind of unbelievable for me, but we will see how this continues. This is also very sapphic, and there's like a lot of angst, so that's enjoyable. But I'm really curious to see how these characters continue to evolve throughout the series and like all of the interweaving and stuff, because it's a little bit messy and these characters are messy and I quite enjoy them. But this does give me sort of similar feelings of like, not quite unease, but some of the just like frustrations that you feel are very similar to Case and Calendar's The Queen of the Conquered. Similar vibes. If you enjoyed that, which I really enjoyed that one. The second book was hard for me. I didn't enjoy that one as much for reasons, but I'm not sure how this is going to go. But yeah, just like the intricacies and messiness of like, again, rebellion and colonization and like people all wrapped up and involved in that. And so yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really am looking forward to the second book. I'm wondering if it'll be as strong as the first. So I hope to get to that soon. Then I listened to Shape a Dragon's Breath by Beniquil Blackgoose. Oh, this was so good. This is our February book for book clubs. So we'll be covering it, Spear Cuts Through Water and To Shape a Dragon's Breath in our live show coming up. This is the first book in a YA, I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy. Again, I'm not sure how many books that they're planning in this. Story that is following our main character of Anacus, and she is a indigenous woman, teenager. She's like 15, and she discovers a dragon egg, and the dragon hatches for her. But again, her area has been colonized by this like, I'm still not sure if it's like, it's sort of like German Norse feeling inspired area, and they have dragons and they heavily control dragons, and so she has this dragon and she is required to then go to this like school to learn to, again, control the dragon, be a dragon rider, take classes, all of that. So this felt like a mix between the boarding school elements of like a Harry Potter, because you have all the teachers, some of the teachers being a pain in the ass, some of the teachers being great, the different classes, all of that, and stuff being really important, and people who like know about dragon society because she's very like new to it, she doesn't know a lot of things, so like that kind of element. Plus the vibes of like the learning about society that was present in A Winter's Promise. I'm forgetting the name, the Mirror Visitor series. I don't love that series. I just found it a little bit slow, but the elements of slowness that are here are mixed in nicely with other things. So I felt like that sort of like society-ish thing is going on there in a nice way. And then there's also like this oral tradition element that is mixing in folklore and mythologies that are influenced by like real world ones, but they are fantastical. But there's like Norse, Russian, indigenous, obviously, and like a few other ones that are mixed in this like storytelling way. This was so lovely. I really enjoyed this. This had, again, all those like boarding school elements, these like storytelling elements. It's very diverse, and there's like mentions of how all of that impacts things. It is queer and like potentially polyamorous, because Anna Koos is from, you know, a society that's like, we don't look at relationships the same way, and so she's constantly challenging those around her. She meets some people at school who are like great, and she meets some other people at school who are like learning and could be better, and she meets some awful people at school, and there's just like so much going on, and like the commentary and the political machination-y type things, and how she's getting pulled into things that she doesn't even want to be involved in, and the way that the magic works, and the way that the dragon magic works, and all of that I found so lovely. So I really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I am very much looking forward to a sequel. This is just, it's just lovely. Like, there's a coziness to it. There's high stakes, like bad things can and do happen, but it also feels very cozy and very nice. So yeah, I really like all the characters. Again, there's representation for basically like everybody. There's some like mental health stuff. It's so good. It's so good. I love her as a character. She's so fantastic. And I love her little dragon and like all the dragons. And again, if you want a better dragon book than the like really popular dragon book that everyone talks about that's bad, this is so much better. Read this and So Let Them Burn. And finally, the last book I read was Polywise by Jessica Fern. This is a nonfiction book about non-monogamy and like navigating a lot of things about non-monogamy and open relationships. And what I really enjoy about these books specifically for just like not just non-monogamous people, but just everyone, is like there's so many skills for like communication and deciding like what you want out of your relationships, regardless of the relationship style that you're in, whether you're monogamous or not. There's value to that, and just the idea of like differentiating yourself from the idea of coupledom as like the best thing that you should achieve and that you should be striving for in the way that our society thinks of it. So yeah, I've been challenging a lot of ideas over the last handful of years about that. This is a great book for that. This is the same author that wrote Polysecure, which I read last year or the year before, I want to say, that I also really enjoyed. But again, she's a therapist who specializes in non-monogamy, but not just non-monogamy, and so she brings a lot of stuff in that you can use for basically anything, and just like paradigm shifts and choosing what you want out of relationships and communication and like repair and all of that. So I quite enjoyed this. 5 out of 5 stars. All right, so that is what I read in February. Comment down below. Let me know what you picked up last month. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.